Good evening. This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchman on the Pod. I'm going to and read in the book 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Charles Chiniquy, and we are in chapter 26. The hour of my absence had been one of anxiety for the curate, and the vicars, but my prompt return filled them with joy. "What news?" they all exclaimed. "Good news," I answered. "The battle has been fierce but short. We have gained the day, and if we are only true to ourselves, another great victory is in store for us. So sure that we are the only ones who think that he will not move a finger to prevent the other priests from following us. This security will make our success infallible, but we must not lose a moment. Let us address our circular to every priest in Canada." 1 hour later, there were more than 20 writers at work, and before 24 hours, more than 300 letters were carried to all the priests, giving them the reasons why we should try, by all fair means, to put an end to the shameful simonical trade in masses which was going on between Canada and France. The week was scarcely ended when letters came from almost all curates and vicars to the bishop respectfully requesting him to withdraw his name from the Society of the Three Masses. Only 50 refused to comply with our request. Our victory was more complete than we had expected, but the Bishop of Quebec, hoping to regain his lost crown, immediately wrote to the Bishop of Montreal, my Lord Chiniquy, to come to his help and show us the enormity of the crime we had committed in rebelling against the will of our ecclesiastical superiors. A few days later, to my great dismay, I received a short and very cold note from the bishop's secretary, telling me that their lordship, the bishops of Montreal and Quebec, wanted to see me at the palace without delay. I had never seen the Bishop of Montreal, and my surprise and disappointment were great in finding myself in the presence of a man, my idea of whom was of gigantic proportions, when in reality he was very small. But I felt exceedingly well pleased by the admirable mixture of firmness, intelligence, and honesty of his whole demeanor. His eyes were piercing as the eagle's, but when fixed on me, I saw in them the marks of a noble and honest heart. The motions of his head were rapid, his sentences short, and he seemed to know only one line, the straight one, when approaching a subject of dealing with a man. He had the merited reputation of being one of the most learned and eloquent men of Canada. The Bishop of Quebec had remained on his sofa and left the Bishop of Montreal to receive. I fell at his feet and asked his blessing, which he gave me in the most cordial way. Then, putting his hand upon my shoulder, he said in a Quaker style, "Is it possible that thou art Chiniquy, that young priest who makes so much noise? How can such a small man make so much noise?" So funny that he had just mentioned that he was small too. There being a smile on his countenance as he uttered these words, I saw at once there was no anger or bad feeling in his heart. I replied, "My lord, do you not know that if most precious pearls and perfumes are put up in the smallest vases?" The bishop saw that this was a compliment to his address. He smilingly replied, "Well, well, if thou art a nosy priest, thou art not a fool. But tell me, why dost thou want to destroy our three-mass society and establish that new one on its ruins, in spite of thy superiors?" "My lord, my answer will be as respectful, short, and plain as possible. I have left the Three-Mass Society because it was my right to do it, without anybody's permission. I hope our venerable Canadian bishops do not wish to be served by slaves." "I did not say," replied the bishop, "that you weren't bound in conscience to remain in the Three-Mass Society, but can I now know why thou hast left such a respectable association, at the head of which thou seest thy bishops and the most venerable priest in Canada?" "I will again be plain in my answer, my lord. If your lordship wants to go to hell with your venerable peace by spiriting away 20 cents from every one of our honest and pious penance for masses, which you get said for 5 by bad priests in Paris, I will not follow you. Moreover, if your lordship wants to be thrown into the river by the furious people when they know how long and how cunningly we have cheated them with our simonical trade in masses, I do not want to follow you into the cold stream." "Well, well," answered the bishop, "let us drop that matter forever. He uttered this short sentence with such an evidence of sincerity and honesty that I saw he really meant it. He had, at a glance, seen that his ground was untenable in the presence of priests who knew their rights and had a mind to stand by them. My joy was great indeed at such a prompt and complete victory. I fell again at the bishop's feet and asked his benediction before taking leave of him. I then left to go and tell the curates and vicars the happy issue of our interview with the Bishop of Montreal. From that time till now, at the death of every priest, the clerical press never failed mentioning whether the deceased priest belonged to the 3 or 1 Mass Society. We had, to some extent, diminished the simonical and infamous trade in masses, but unfortunately we had not destroyed it, and I know that today it has revived. Since I left the Church of Rome, the bishops of Quebec have raised the 3 Mass Society from its grave. It is a public fact that no priest will dare deny that the trade in masses is still conducted on a large scale with France. There are in Paris and other large cities in that country public agencies to carry on that shameful traffic. It is generally in the hands of booksellers or merchants or of church ornaments. Every year, their houses send a large number of prospectuses through France and Belgium and other Catholic countries, in which they say that in order to help the priests who, having received money for their masses, don't know where to have them said, they offer a premium of 25 or 30 cents to those who will send them the surplus of the money they have in mind to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass. The priests who have such surplus, tempted by that premium, which is usually paid with a watch or a chain or a chalice, disgorge a part or the whole of the large sums they possess into the hands of the pious merchants, who take this money and use it as they please. But they never pay the masses in money. They give only merchandise. For instance, that priest will receive a watch if he promises to celebrate 100 or 200 masses, or a chalice to celebrate 300 or 400 masses. I have here in my hand several of the contracts of promissory notes sent by those merchants of masses to the priests. The public will, no doubt, read the following documents with interest. They were handed me by a priest lately converted from the Church of Rome. And let's see. Some of this I can't read because it is in Latin, it looks like. Let's see. How do we see that? Let's see. Editor of the works of Mr. Defrich designates Cure of Notre Dame des Victoires, delivered to the Reverend Mr. Carmel, curate of Bassy Alps, Paris, October 12, 1874, 10 meters of satin cloth at 22 francs, 220. 8 feet of merino, all wool, 123. Month of May, 2. History of Mary Christina, 1.4. Life of Saint Stalinus Kaska, 2. Meditations of the Soul, 4. Jesus Christ, the Light of the World, 2. Packing and Freight, 9.3. Total, 363.70. Mr. Curate, we have the honor of informing you that the packages containing the articles you have ordered on the 4th of October were shipped on the 12th of October to Chiniquy, where we received to go and ask for them. For the payment of these articles, we request you to say the following masses. 58 ad intentiam of the giver for the discharge of Reverend Mr. Montanet, 58 A.D. Intentiam of the givers for the discharge of Reverend Mr. Hogue, 100 to 188 for the dead for the discharge of Reverend Mr. Wald. Mr. Curate, will you be kind enough to say or have said all those masses in the shortest time possible, and as Reverend gentlemen, if they make any inquiries about the acquittal of those masses, respectfully yours, Paris, November 11th, 1874. How peculiar, very peculiar. Reverend Mr. Carmel, we have the honor of addressing you the invoice of what we forwarded to you on the 12th of October. On account, we have put to your credit 188 masses. We respectfully request you to get set the following intentions: 73 for the dead, to the acquittal of Reverend Mr. Waters; 70 pro defuncto, for the discharge of 20 ad intentionium donatus, Reverend Mr. C, 13 AD intentionium donatus, 176. Mr. Curate, be kind enough to say these masses, or have them said as soon as possible, and answer the reverend gentlemen who may inquire from you about their acquittal. The 188 masses mentioned in our letter on the 3rd, added to the 176 here mentioned, make 364 francs, the value of the goods sent you. We thought you would like to have the pamphlets of propaganda we addressed you. Respectfully yours, signed, Aunt Levisquis. Hence, it is that priests in France and elsewhere have gold watches, rich house furniture, and interesting books purchased with the money paid by our poor deluded Canadian Catholics to their priests for masses which are turned into mercantile commodities in other places. It would be difficult to say who makes the best bargain between those merchants of masses, the priests to whom they are sold, or those for whom they are bought at a discount of 25 cents to 30%. The only evident thing is the cruel deception practiced by the credulity and ignorance of the Roman Catholics by their priests and bishops. Today, the houses of Dr. Anthony Levisquis in Paris are the most accredited in France. In 1874, the house of Mismy was doing an immense business with its stocks of masses, but in an evil day the government suspected that the number of masses paid into their hands exceeded the number of those celebrated through their hired priests. The suspicion soon turned into certainty when the books were examined. It was then found that an incredible number of masses which were to empty the large room of purgatory never reached their destination, but only filled the purse of the Parisian mass merchant, and so the unlucky Mismy was unceremoniously sent to the penitentiary to meditate on the merits of the holy sacrifice of the Mass, which had been engulfed in his treasures. But these facts are not known by the poor Roman Catholics of Canada, who are fleeced more and more by their priests under the pretext of saving souls from purgatory. A new element of success in the large swindling operations of the Canadian priests has lately been discovered. It is well known that in the greater part of the United States, the poor deluded Irish pay $1 to their priests instead of a shilling for a low mass. Those priests whose consciences are sufficiently elastic, as is often the case, keep the money without ever thinking of having the masses said, and soon get rich. But there are some whose natural honesty shrinks from the idea of stealing, unable to celebrate all the masses paid for and requested at their hand. They send the dollars to some of their clerical friends in Canada, who of course prefer these $1 masses to the 25-cent ones paid by the French Canadians. However, they keep that secret and continue to fill their treasury. There are, however, many priests in Canada who think it less evil to keep those large sums of money in their own hands than to give them to the bishops to traffic with the merchants of Paris. At the end of one of the ecclesiastical retreats in the seminary of St. Sulpice in 1850, Bishop Bourget told us that one of the priests who had lately died had requested him, in the name of Jesus Christ, to ask every priest to take a share in the $4,000 which he had received for masses. He never said. We refused to grant him that favor, and those $4,000 received by that priest, like the millions put into the hands of other priests and the bishops, turned to be nothing less than an infamous swindling operation under the mask of religion. To understand what the priests of Rome are, let the readers note what is said in the Roman Catholic Bible of the priests of Babylon. And King Astyages was gathered to his fathers, and Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom, and Daniel conversed with the king and was honored above all his friends. Now the Babylonians had an idol called Bel, and there were sent upon him every day 12 measures of fine flour, and 40 sheep, and 6 vessels of wine. And the king worshipped it, and went daily to adore. But Daniel worshipped his own God, and the king said unto him, Why dost thou not worship Baal? But who answered and said, Because I may not worship idols made with hands, but the living God, who hath created the heavens and the earth, and have sovereignty over all flesh. Then the king said, Thinkest thou not that Baal is a living God? Seest thou not how much he eateth and drinketh every day? Then Daniel smiled and said, O king, be not deceived, for this is but clay within and brass without, and did never eat or drink anything. So that king was wroth, and called for his priests, and said, If ye tell me not who this is that devoureth these expenses, ye shall die. But if ye can certify me that Baal devoureth them, then Daniel shall die. For he has spoken blasphemy against Baal. And Daniel said unto the king, Let it be according to thy word. Now the priests of Baal were 70, besides their wives and children. And the king went with Daniel to the temple of Baal. So Baal's priests said, Lo, we got out, but thou, O king, set on the meat, and make ready the wine, and shut the door fast, and seal it with thine own signet. And tomorrow when thou comest in, if thou findest not that Baal had eaten up all, we shall suffer death, or else Daniel that speaketh falsely against Baal shall die, and they little regarded it, for under the table they had made a privy entrance, whereby they entered continually and consumed those things. So when they were gone forth, the king set meats before Baal. Now Daniel had commanded his servants to bring ashes, and those that strewn throughout all the temple, in the presence of the king alone. Then went they out and shut the door, and it sealed with the king's signet, and so departed. Now in the night came the priests with their wives and children, so they were wont to do, and did eat and drink up all. In the morning betime the king arose, and Daniel with him. And the king said, Daniel, are the seals whole? And he said, Yea, O king, they be whole. And as soon as they had opened the door, the king opened upon the table, and cried with a loud voice, Great art thou, O Baal, and with thee there is no deceit at all. Then laughed Daniel, and held the king that he should not go in, and said, Behold now the pavement, and mark well those footprints are these. And the king said, I see the footprints of men, women, and children. And the king was angry, and took the priests with their wives and children, who showed them privy doors, where they came in, and consumed such things as were on the tables. Therefore the king slew them, and delivered Baal into Daniel's power, who destroyed him and his temple. Who does not pity the king of Babylon, who, looking at his clay and brass god, exclaimed, Great art thou, O Baal, with thee there is no deceit, but in the deception practiced by the priests of the pope on their poor, deluded dupes, less cruel and infamous? Where is the difference between that Babylonian god, small g, made with brass and baked clay, and the god, small g, of the Roman Catholics, made with a handful of wheat flour baked between 2 hot polished irons? How skillful were the priests in keeping the secret of what became of the rich daily offerings brought to the hungry God. Who could suspect that there was a secret trap through which they came with their wives and children to eat the rich offerings? So today, through the simple and blind Roman Catholics, who could suppose that the immense sums of money given every day to the priests to glorify God, purify the souls of men, bring all kinds of blessings upon the donors, were on the contrary turned into the most ignominious and swindling operation the world has ever seen? Though the brass god, small g, of Babylon was a contemptible item, is not the wafer god, small g, of Rome still more so? Though the priests of Baal were skillful deceivers, are they not surpassed in the art of deception by the priests of Rome? Do not these carry on their operations on a much larger scale than the former? But as there is always a day of retribution for the great iniquities of this world, when all things will be revealed, just as the cunning of the priests of Babylon could not save them when God sent his prophet to take away the mask behind which they deceived their people, so let the priests of Rome know that God will, sooner or later, send his prophet who will tear off the mask behind which they deceived the world. Their big and awkward and flat feet will be seen and exposed, and the very people whom they keep prostrated before their idols, crying, O God, with thee there is no deceit at all, will become the instruments of the justice of God in the great day of restitution. Absolutely insane, isn't it? Well, that right there concludes chapter 26. And hopefully here in a few days I will continue with chapter 27. I love you all so very, very much. Keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you will not sin against God and you will not be deceived. I love you all so very much. Be blessed.